Water scarcity and water pollution have a huge impact on the way we live. Water issues dictate the very way that we live. The use of fertilizers and pesticides has helped increase the amount of food that's been produced, which is great for food security, but not so much for the water that sustains the farms on which food is grown. Let's look at the biggest threats to the water that feeds our farms. First of all, there's the drought and aridification that's taking place. Water's an important resource for agricultural production, and it plays a significant role in food security for the world's most vulnerable populations. Let's get one thing straight first. Climate change is a clear and present danger. It's affecting our water supplies like never before. Global warming is now causing droughts that last longer than ever before. The record dry spells of East Africa and the western United States are clear evidence of that. The states of Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, and Utah are experiencing a historic long-term drought, and that's a clear example of how climate change is making our habitats arider and probably unlivable in the very near future. Just to be clear, a drought is a more temporary situation, while aridity is permanent and often irreversible. That said, long-term droughts can change the very climate of a region and make them arid forever. The Global Land Outlook, a report put together by the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, the numbers are alarming. More than one-third of the planet's population lives in regions that face severe water scarcity. Here's another staggering statistic. Nearly two-thirds of the world's population experience severe water scarcity for at least 1 month each year, and that amounts to 4 billion people. On the other extreme, climate change and global warming have caused severe flooding in the South Asian countries of Bangladesh, Pakistan, and India. This, of course, has had terrible consequences for farmers and the amount of food produced for these already food-insecure countries. Flooding can also cause pollution. And then there's the mismanagement of groundwater that is worsening the water crisis. Much of our farmlands are watered through the use of irrigation techniques. About 43% of the water used by irrigation is groundwater. All is well and good so far, but here's where the problem lies. We've extracted way too much groundwater in many parts of the world. One such example is the country of India, and the reason behind it is the improvement in drilling technology over the past few decades. In fact, the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations claimed that about 10% of the global grain harvest is being produced by further depleting already scarce groundwater resources. The fact that we keep extracting groundwater indiscriminately means that we may soon be running it into scarcity. The way it affects our farms is mainly through the impact on irrigation. Irrigated agriculture accounts for 20% of the world's total cultivated land, but contributed 40% to the total food production. This means that irrigated land is about twice as productive in comparison to land that's watered by the rain. Besides the indiscriminate pumping of groundwater, there's also the problem of polluted groundwater that can be harmful to farming. Groundwater faces the threat of salinity, nitrate pollution, microbiological contamination, pesticides, and synthetic fertilizers even. Climate change also has a role to play in the worsening of groundwater levels and their quality too. Rising sea levels because of global warming have affected groundwater in coastal areas. This has happened because of coastal flooding and increasing seawater intrusion. However, this problem of scarce groundwater resources can be fixed to a certain extent. Improved and sustainable management practices are needed, and technological innovations such as drip irrigation can lighten the load on the world's groundwater reserves. Meanwhile, other food-producing farms are also threatened by the intrusion of salt water into freshwater supplies. As irrigation gains even more importance in agriculture, it comes with a whole new set of problems, and as the world's demand for food grows, it worsens the situation. More and more land is needed for cultivation. With increasing droughts and aridization, the dependency on irrigation to feed our farms grows even more. But here's the problem with irrigation. Intensive irrigation has been known to lead to a rise in the levels of the water table. This has siphoned salt into the soil and onwards to the roots of the plants. This obviously affects their growth. In cases where the level of salt in the soil water is excessive, the water flows back from the plant back into the soil. This essentially dehydrates the plant. The dehydration of a plant lowers its yield significantly. Excessive salinity may also just kill the plant. There's another source of salt in farm soil, and it's one that we've looked at earlier as well. We all know that climate change has led to a rise in levels. This means that seawater or salt water has easily penetrated groundwater aquifers. Not only does this affect the crops and the amount of yield produced, but it also renders our drinking water supplies useless. The United Nations Environment Program says that about 10% of all rivers around the world are affected by salinity-related pollution. So basically, we have two major sources of fresh water that are at risk from salinity: our groundwater and our rivers as well. And there's just plain simple pollution that's harming our water. Since the 1950s, inventions like synthetic fertilizers, chemical pesticides, and high-yielding crops have helped us to increase the amount our farms grow. In fact, the increase is dramatic to say the least. However, all this comes at a very high environmental cost, and it affects our health as well. Farming has resulted in large amounts of manure, chemical products, antibiotics, and growth hormones being released into our water systems. Needless to say, this has polluted the very water that's meant to fuel our farming practices. One of the most commonly used chemicals in farming is nitrate. Nitrate's been known to cause blue baby syndrome, leading to the death of infants. Linked to the issue of droughts and aridification is the usage of wastewater. This wastewater could be from domestic use or industrial use even. In some arid regions, such water is often used to grow food. The pathogens contained in that water cause diarrhea and cholera. Most of the time, this happens in underdeveloped regions where farmers may not even be aware of the risks of using wastewater. The problem of polluted water is made worse because of flooding. Flooding causes sewage systems and even fertilizer storage to overflow into water sources. This pollutes both surface and groundwater. Polluted groundwater has a long-term effect on crops as well. Impacted crops have an effect on human health as well. And lastly, land degradation is also a threat to our water. Did you know that mankind has changed more than 70% of the planet's land area? And not in a good way. The United Nations Global Land Outlook report calls it unparalleled environmental degradation. But what counts as land degradation? Land degradation includes human activities such as clearing the land, inconsiderate farming practices, growing urbanization, inappropriate irrigation, huge amounts of industrial waste generation, and even the mining of stone, sand, and minerals. All of this has led to the soil losing its ability to store and filter water in many places. It's becoming increasingly difficult to grow crops and raise healthy livestock. Scientists have predicted that this could lead to a disruption in food supplies if the trend of land degradation continues. What makes it worse is that extreme weather brought on by climate change is speeding up land degradation. This includes things like heavy rains followed by long periods of drought. But is there a way out of this crisis? Water dictates every facet of human existence: what we eat, the products we consume, and how we travel. Water-related issues are the single biggest threat to humanity today. The amount of fresh water has fallen by over 20% in the last 20 years. So just how do we ensure a more sustainable future for food security? Adopting practices like drip irrigation is one way of using more water efficiently. Drip irrigation is an efficient way to water our yards and gardens even. Basically, the practice helps save time, money, and water. It even prevents disease by minimizing water contact with different parts of a plant. Drip irrigation can be used effectively in regions suffering from drought and even aridity. But the solution is not something that single communities or even large organizations like the United Nations can achieve on their own. The threats faced by our water sources that sustain our food supplies need a global effort. What is required is a coordinated effort for the development and management of water and land resources. Such initiatives can create economic and social welfare in an equitable fashion. Care must be taken such that the sustainability of ecosystems comes first. It's going to be a long and strenuous process that'll involve local communities, individuals, and institutions coming together for the management of the world's water systems. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think is the biggest threat to our water sources? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.